This is Distant Replay, the podcast that goes back in time to relive all the greatest events that we witnessed in sports. From upsets, to championships, to cultural moments, we discuss it all. Coming up on today's episode.
Ortiz into deep right field. Back is Sheffield. We'll see you later tonight.
Tonight we're talking about Yankees and Red Sox, one of the great rivalries in all of sports, and we go back to 2004, the ALCS, the shifter, the series shifter, the rivalry shifter. Game 4 is when it all began, and it's completely different now that between these two franchises than it was before this game started. Welcome into Distant Replay. I'm Ben George, alongside Mike Noto. Mike, welcome in.
Hey, Benny. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well. I was looking forward to this game. We had it on our list. The only problem was, and I should have kind of realized this before we went into it, but you got to invest a lot of time if you want to go back and watch an old Yankees Red Sox game.
Ben, all these games from this era were long. Even the regular season games were long. Never mind something with the heightened tension of a playoff game with all the added pitching changes to go along with how patient all the hitters were, working deep counts, the things that made these teams great against other teams really showed when they played each other, because they both generally had the same strategy when it came to the approach to the game. And I had forgotten too how long these games were, but man, oof.
Yeah, so it's different doing basketball game versus doing a Yankees Red Sox game. We're going to go through the entire thing. We watched it start to finish as it originally aired on Fox. We're going to go through it tonight with you. We're going to set the stage for what was important leading up to this game, both the history of these two baseball clubs, the previous year, but then also go through the game itself and then kind of some of the fallout afterwards. And I've got some questions for you, Mike, because this is before I had moved to Connecticut to work with ESPN. And once I got up there, I learned all about this rivalry. I mean, I knew it was a rivalry, right? I mean, if you're a fan of sports at all, you're aware of it, but you just don't know, just some of the nuances, a lot of the specifics, and, just knowing that if you sit down on a Tuesday night to watch one of these games, you got to give yourself 4 hours, because it's never going to be really shorter than that. So I'm going to lean on you some tonight to kind of explain. I got some questions for you, but also just kind of give me a little more perspective on this series and what it all meant. So we'll dive into it. Let me remind you first, though, you can find us online, distantreplaypodcast.com. We're going to put this game there as it originally aired. Again, it's almost 4 hours with commercials taken out and some edit between batters. So it's still 4 hours of time. I got to the 5th inning, Mike, and I think I texted you. I was like, I think I might be done with this game pretty soon. And it was still like another day before I even finished it up, because we weren't even halfway done with the broadcast in like the 6th inning. It was absurd.
It's not many times that the announcers show the actual time clock during the game and it reads 1 a.m. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
when the game started at 8:20.
Exactly. A couple other housekeeping notes. You can find us on YouTube as well, and also on Twitter, Distant Podcast. We just started up a Instagram account. We're going to join the Instagram world, and you can find us there, Distant Replay Podcast. So let's dive into it, and let's set the stage first. So, Mike, let's go big picture, the kind of the history of the sport. And we're not going to spend a ton of time going back to, the Babe Ruth trade or anything. But really, I mean, when you look at the Red Sox, and anybody now that's honestly like 20 college kids, maybe even like mid-20s, might not realize, how different this series was, because the Red Sox coming into this, again, 2004, the Red Sox did not have any postseason success. I mean, we know the history of the World Series, right? They were trying to break that curse, but I mean, they were rarely even in the playoffs.
It's incredible how this game and the significance of it, right? You might think, well, it's a game 4 of a 7-game series, but you can literally draw a line at this game and this rivalry before this game and after this game, and how much everything has changed, whether it be the fortunes of the two franchises, whether it be the fan bases, which I think were most affected by this game, as we'll get into as we go on here, the Boston sports landscape as a whole. Although the Patriots had some success before this, it absolutely exploded after this and became title town for all intents and purposes in professional sports. And look, it's one of those things where there's certain moments in sports that you remember for their significance. And this game, we didn't realize it at the time, because we didn't know what would happen in the coming days. but we were seeing something very, very significant, especially if you were a baseball fan, and most importantly, if you were a fan of the Yankees or the Red Sox.
Yeah, so just go 30 years. 30 years prior to this game, you had the Red Sox losing the World Series in 75 to the Reds. They lost again to your Mets in 86. Mike, I know you really still celebrate that one. You long for the glory days of the
even though I don't
Mets.
remember it, I have to celebrate it. That's life as a Mets fan.
Exactly. But then from there, after 86, they really just had a couple of appearances. I think maybe 5 appearances. And then as the late 90s kind of rolled around, when the Yankees were really had a stranglehold over baseball. They had an opportunity in 99. They lost to the Yankees in the ALCS 4-1. Again, the rival. I mean, this is kind of the story of the Red Sox, right? I mean, it's being pretty good and having really good teams, but just the Yankees not being able to get past the Yankees, because you had 99 and then again 2003, which was the ultimate heartbreaker, right?
Yeah, and you know what I think of when I think of the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry is that you hit it on the head. The Red Sox always had good teams, right? Especially in this late 90s, early 2000s run, but not teams as good as the Yankees. But in 04 now, this is the first season where, at least like locally around here, you got the feeling the Red Sox actually did have the horses to pull something off, which made the 3-0 they were down in the series more devastating, because you had the pitching staff and the lineup, which seemed primed to finally overthrow the Yankees. But I agree with you. It took a long time for the Red Sox as a franchise to get to this point.
I mean, and look at the other side, the Yankees. I mean, look, the Yankees had obviously the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, the Yankees were, everybody's team, right? I mean, that's when they had the glory days of baseball with the lineups they had. But they had some dark days in the 60s, late 60s, and some of the 70s. They had some good teams. The 80s were pretty atrocious. But now in the 90s is when Joe Torre, then you had this whole crop of Yankees that came through at the same time, and Jeter and Rivera, Bernie Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on. So they had won the World Series in 96. They won it in 98. They won it in 99. They won it in 2000. And then they lost it in 2001 and 2003. So at this point, it's just assumed the Yankees are going to make the World Series. I mean, this is the kind of run they had been on, right?
Yeah, look, it's really tough to be a fan of a team that plays in the shadow of the Yankees, right? So if there's one thing I have in common with Red Sox fans as a Mets fan, it's that feeling. They're constantly in the mix. They're constantly dominant. They're constantly reloading. This Yankees team, in the way it was comprised, right? I think their pitching staff was a little bit weaker than it typically is, but their lineup, it was throughout this whole era, it was the core guys like a Posada, a Jeter, a Bernie Williams, and then you sprinkled in these hired guns like A-Rod, Gary Sheffield, Matsui, and something that can't go underscored in this with the rivalry is what went on with A-Rod just the offseason before, and I think how that impacted things going into the 2004 season. I'm sure you're pretty well versed on that, right, Ben?
Yeah, give us a quick summary.
Okay, so 2004, the Rangers basically say, we might have overextended ourselves with the A-Rod contract. A-Rod is available. A-Rod is available for trade. Okay, all of the rumors, have A-Rod going to the Red Sox. Supposedly, there's a deal done to send him to the Red Sox. It's literally at that point. At the last minute, that falls through. The Yankees get involved seemingly out of nowhere at the time, because the Yankees thought they had a third baseman in Aaron Boone, who's coming off his ALCS winning home run the year before versus the Red Sox. Yeah. Aaron Boone gets hurt in a pickup basketball game, tears his ACL. The third base position becomes open for the Yankees. They get assurances from A-Rod that if he comes, he's okay with playing third as opposed to shortstop, and the rest is history. And now A-Rod, the best player in baseball at the time, I think, him and Bonds, right?
Yeah.
Is now front and center in this rivalry. And it just adds to at the time, the woe is me Red Sox fan, nothing ever goes our way. Mm-hmm. And again, before this game, that was a real thing.
It's funny because, you kind of forget about that. They talk about it in this broadcast a little bit and kind of referenced it. But, now 17, 16 years later, you forget about that. But I bet if you ask a Red Sox fan, that might have been the best thing that happened to them. Would you agree? Like not landing A-Rod there?
Yeah, I mean, how could you argue with it, right? They've won 4 championships in 15 years, right? And A-Rod was a major league player for most of those 15 years, so I guess you can't argue with that.
Right. So that's kind of setting the stage for this year. So this year they roll in, both teams really good. Throughout the season, this is a back and forth East division as it usually is. It's the Yankees and Red Sox and everybody else in the East. But the Yankees end up winning the division by 3 games. And the Red Sox cruise through their first round. They sweep the Angels, move through there pretty easily. The Yankees on the other side beat the Twins pretty comfortably. And now, once again, back-to-back years, you have the Yankees, you have the Red Sox, an opportunity to go to the World Series. And these first 3 games, Mike, I mean, people remember this because it was so ridiculous how this series played out early on because the pitching of the Red Sox kind of fell apart. Yankees win 10-7 in game 1, 14 hits. You've seen it kind of cruises through. Game 2, pitching was a little bit better, but you have Pedro on the mound. You throw him out there, you expect to get the win there because Pedro is in his prime at this point. But John Lieber, of all players, I forgot about him too. Again, outduels him. They win 3-1. Rivera gets a second save. And then game 3 is where it just seemed like this series collapsed on top of the on top of the Red Sox. The Yankees win 19-8, 22 hits. It's just an onslaught from start to finish. What's the mood at that point? I mean, I saw this from a distance in Alabama. But for you, being up there and around it, what's the mood right now after this game 3?
Okay, so I happen to be out in an establishment. I'll never forget this watching game 3. And when you go out to a bar like I did back in the day around where I live, it's pretty closely split Yankees Red Sox fans, all right? And the way anyone who watched that game with a group of people with both fan bases there, you probably remember what it was like. I mean, the Yankee fans, like usual, rubbing it in the face of the Red Sox fans. Red Sox fans completely dejected, like a here we go again. We bought in. We thought it was going to be different this year. We have the starting pitching horses in Schilling and Martinez. We have a middle of the lineup that may be the best 3-4 hitters in the history of baseball with Ortiz and Ramirez, but it's still not enough. If that's not enough, we're going to get embarrassed here and lose 19-8 in our home ballpark. It was just a very defeated Red Sox fan base at that time. Waiting for this game 4. It cannot be understated. It cannot be understated how dejected they were.
Okay, and look, because you're coming out of that, getting beat up, getting the, as they said in the game, the Yankees were saying keep the line moving, and that's basically the approach they took. They were just get a guy up there, get him around the bases, let's score him, let's keep it moving, and then you go into game 4, and now you're talking about a pitching matchup where you have Schilling and Martinez have already gone. Your top 2 pitchers for the Red Sox. You got Derek Lowe on the mound. Derek Lowe, solid pitcher, right? I mean, never extraordinary, I don't think, but he was never an awful pitcher. He was, he was good. He's had some really great outings, had some great years. Just a solid guy. But you're going against El Duque, who at this time, El Duque is look, in this year, he'd coming off an injury, right? So they had worked him back, and they talk about this early in the game. He's coming back from an injury where his velocity had been down, but now they kind of started seeing it ticking up, so they feel comfortable starting him again. But early in the year when he first started, his numbers were really good, 8-2, and even the previous, you go back 5, 6, 7 years, this guy was one of the better pitchers in baseball, right?
El Duque at this point in his career, so El Duque was 9-3 in the postseason coming into this game. Okay, that's basically what he was on the Yankees for at this point of his career. You went through his great start to the season. He only pitched 85 innings in the regular season. He went through an actual dead arm period. Yeah. And like you said, they built him up throughout the rest of the regular season to prime him for a postseason run. It was pretty well known, if you follow baseball up here, that's what he was on the team for, to have some kind of role in the October pitching staff. And I think it gave them the perfect opportunity to start him here because, they're up 3-0. You didn't really know the urgency they would have to win this game in the moment. Good time to start him, clutch postseason guy. And yeah, I mean, that's El Duque in a nutshell.
And I think you have to pretty much assume going into this, you got to give the nod to the Yankees, right? I mean, not only with what they're coming off of in that game 3, but just the pitching matchup itself, right?
Oh, for sure. Derek Lowe was a solid pitcher, but not at the level of El Duque, especially in the playoffs. Yeah,
indeed. So just another kind of idea of just how big of a long shot it was at this point. 100, I think there were 100 and so the odds on the Red Sox, and I went back just kind of searching this game around, came across a message board that had a message from 2004, and the Red Sox odds to win the World Series at this point And I don't know, again, this is a message board talk from 2004, so I don't know where this was listed or where this was offered. But 50 to 1 odds, the Red Sox are going to win the World Series. That's to come back from a 3-0 deficit to the Yankees and then have to go on and win the World Series, having not done that in, 100 and some odd years? 150 to 1 odds that would happen. Okay, so that just gives you an idea of exactly how up against the wall they were and how improbable it was that they could not just win Game 4, but go on and win this series. So let's take a look at Game 4, Mike. This is October 17th, 2004, an 8:20 first pitch. Okay, God forbid we start a Yankees-Red Sox game before 8 o'clock, please, moving forward. But this is at Fenway Park, as we talked about. Let's go through the lineups real quick as we get started. We've got pitching matchups. So the Yankees lineup, and again, I got a couple thoughts on this. You had Jeter, A-Rod, Sheffield, Matsui, Bernie Williams, Jorge Posada, Ruben Sierra. Now, Tony Clark was in at first base because Olerud had hurt himself the previous game in an at-bat, and he had Miguel Cairo at second. Number one, I love Gary Sheffield, and I'd forgotten his brief time with the Yankees, but, man, he was one of my favorite players to watch. And then you had Hideki Matsui, who was batting really well. But that I guess 1 through 6, and even Ruben Sierra, who is kind of the very end of his career at this point, I mean, that lineup is tough, especially those first 6.
It's just a stacked lineup. Everywhere you look, it's just a stacked lineup and a tough out. I mean, even a guy like a Miguel Cairo, right? A tough out. You know what I mean? Not a pushover. There was no pushovers in this lineup for the Yankees. Just a quintessential Yankee lineup from this era and why they beat teams into submission in the regular season. You know, this was just too much of a gauntlet for a regular team without a stellar pitching staff to get through. And look, the first 3 games of this series, I mean, you look at the stats in this game when they were showing the statistics of the Yankee batters. I mean, you had multiple guys over 400 for the series. You had Matsui, who had 7 or 8 extra base hits in the first 3 games of the series.
Right.
You know, just a total unit this lineup was.
Yeah, A-Rod had a couple home runs coming in. Sheffield was hitting like 560 or something ridiculous.
Sheffield was great with the Yankees in this run. He was perfect for that lineup. He was. I mean, it's not a newsflash. He's a good hitter, but he was really good with the Yankees in particular. Yeah,
he's been a few years with them, but this was year number 1 with the Yankees. So that's the Yankees lineup. Red Sox, you had Damon leading off, Orlando Cabrera, who I'd forgotten about until now, him being the guy that took over for Nomar. Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz. Manny's in his prime at this point, so is David Ortiz. Veritek, then Trot Nixon, Kevin Millar, Bill Miller, and Mark Bellhorn. I mean, you look at the bottom 4 of that lineup compared to the Yankees, and it's no surprise that, you know, the Yankees were expected to win this thing.
Yeah, this is the thing with the Red Sox lineup, right? Or in their team as a whole. They had 4 lights out, probably top 10 to 12 players in baseball, right? They had Ortiz and Ramirez, and then a pitching staff, Schilling and Martinez, okay?
Yeah.
Especially when you look at their lineup. A lot of these guys are beloved if you talk to Red Sox fans, like the Bill Millers of the world, the Trot Nixons of the world, and guys like that. But those 2 guys in the middle of that lineup, just from knowing a ton of Yankee fans, every time those 2 got up, it was a hold your breath kind of moment for Yankees fans. Those 2, because they not only were great hitters in general, but they always killed the Yankees. Always.
Yeah, I mean, they showed, well, we'll get to it a little bit later. I'll save this nugget on Ortiz. But so let's jump into it because, this game lasts a little bit of a time. We're not gonna go through everything, but we're gonna get some thoughts on a few of the innings that mattered. And a quick other note on Lowe too in this series, he was pitching out of the bullpen. They mentioned here in the start of this game for a lot of this postseason, and he was pissed off about it because he wasn't getting the opportunity to start, and he had this chance here in this game. So just another quick note going into this.
Hey Ben, one thing before we get to the game. Try to guess, just to show the dominance of Ramirez and Ortiz this season, try to guess their combined home runs and RBIs.
Ramirez and Ortiz
from this season.
And I haven't looked it up. So I'd probably say you're looking somewhere around 85 home runs and probably 240 RBIs.
84 home runs.
Oh!
Very close. 269 RBIs.
Dang. I mean, yeah.
Insane.
That's ridiculous.
Just to put it in perspective.
That's a great point. So this game is broadcast on Fox, by the way, Mike. As we mentioned, we always talk about the broadcast itself. And this was our good friend Joe Buck, Tim McCarver, and your boy, Al Leiter?
So Joe Buck, I think he's a good baseball announcer. I think he's good in both sports he does, but especially baseball. McCarver used to do the Met games when I was a little kid on WOR. So I love on Channel 9. So I love Tim McCarver. And Al Leiter, although he was a Met for a time in his career, I'm not a huge Al Leiter guy. I think he's actually good in the studio with MLB Network. I don't think he's a good game announcer. And even though he was pretty good for the Mets, I just never liked Al Leiter. I don't know why.
Okay.
But he wasn't bad in this game, though.
Right. You know what I noticed about Joe Buck, and we've had him on a couple of these games we've done over the course of the podcast, but his voice never changes. Like if you hear him in like the late 90s compared to this year, he sounds exactly the same, which is kind of surprising because look, I mean, the voice is kind of that's who they are and that's their personality, but they evolve. They get a little deeper, a little rougher, whatever, but he just sounds exactly the same as he has over 25 years.
Yeah, I like that steady, dependable Joe Buck like approach he takes. Like I don't need guys screaming when a big play happens. You know what I mean? I know he gets knocked for that sometimes, so I happen to like his approach. But it gave me chills when Al Leiter was giving pitching lessons in the booth. I don't know. But I know that's what he was there for. You know what I mean? But him showing how to throw a curveball, it's like, Al, you weren't
right.
saying, they were talking about Sandy Koufax. It's like, Al, you're the furthest thing from Sandy Koufax.
You're not Sandy. All right, let's jump into it, Mike. So early on, not a whole lot happens. Both pitchers are doing pretty well early on. El Duque, has a little bit of lack of control early, but still getting a lot of strikeouts. I think the third inning, first really chance here for the Yankees after El Duque escapes a little bit of trouble, or the Red Sox escape a little bit of trouble the inning before, but they can't do anything about it in the third. Jeter, again, top of the order. Jeter had a great at bat, and this is like quintessential Jeter, right? He gets up there, he's battling, he's fouling off a bunch of breaking balls in the dirt, some pitches that probably should have gotten him out, stays alive, and then eventually gets an easy single, right? Kind of fights it off, reaches first. Next at bat, first pitch, A-Rod homers over the left field wall,
bomb.
Crushed it, right? And
that was a bomb, man.
That's like
absolute bomb.
Isn't that what just like crushes you about the Yankees in this time period? Like, you're in good shape. You get through, you got 2 outs, you got Jeter right where you want him. He finds a way to get on, and then the next at bat just crushes you. And
remember, like that's what I'm getting back to what we were talking about before. This is A-Rod now putting them ahead in a clinching game.
Yeah.
And this is the Red Sox fans saying, man, this guy could have been on our team. Now he's literally, going to be the one to do us in an elimination game.
Yeah. That was funny. They threw the home run ball back on the field. Damon grabs it, throws it back up into the bleachers, and they throw it back on the field again before eventually
that was funny.
He got the ball back. So it's 2-0 Yankees after 2.5 innings. They get through the third. El Duque's pitching pretty well at this point. Through 3 innings, got 4 strikeouts. He hasn't gotten in a ton of trouble. He's given up a couple base runners, but for the most part, pitching pretty well, even going through 4 innings. 2-0 after 4 innings. Red Sox only have 1 hit. This game's moving along pretty quickly, too. I mean, 4 innings go by, and on this YouTube video we watched, probably, 45 minutes, maybe 50 minutes. Then we get to the 5th. Things start picking up a little bit here, Mike. So you have a leadoff walk for the Red Sox. This is kind of where El Duque starts to unravel, which is crazy to me because it's 2-0. You've got there's very little energy in the park right now. I'll give the Red Sox fans credit because they stayed pretty alive for the most part. I mean, I think back to where you had to be mentally at this point, down 2-0. A-Rod just homered. You're down 3-0 in the series. The history of your franchise is pretty pathetic. It's great. It's a great franchise, but your actually success is pretty pathetic. And here you are. But they still were pretty loud. But the 5th inning, why isn't El Duque just coming out and attacking these guys? I don't know that he was trying to get too cute with it, lost control, whatever it was. But he walks Kevin Millar. He gets a ground out. Again, could have been a double play turn, wasn't. He walks Bellhorn. And all of a sudden, you're back to the top of the order. And that was the problem. He just didn't have any control there in that inning.
Yeah, and first of all, I agree with you with the Red Sox fans. Throughout this whole game, I thought their attitudes in the stands were great, considering everything we've been talking about up to this point. But the big underrated play of this game is what you just said, is Damon avoids that double play being turned on him and saves the inning.
Yeah.
Because that would have been the 3rd out of the inning, I'm pretty sure.
It happens twice. I mean, Millar, they pointed out he kind of waited late to slide and maybe threw Jeter off, so Jeter didn't have a throw. Then again, but on first, Damon grounds the ball to shortstop. Looks like a double play, but he's able to beat it out. Now you got 2 outs, but again, now you're to the heart of the order.
Yeah, and that, I just, that's another one of these plays when you watch these games that Damon beating that ball out, just a huge play that goes largely unnoticed.
Yeah, so you had Mueller at third, Damon at first, Cabrera singles to right on the ground ball, gets through, runner scores. Now it's 2-1. El Duque walks, Manny Ramirez. Then you got bases loaded for David Ortiz, the spot that Red Sox fans wanted to see, and he comes through a single line drive, scores a couple runners. It's 3-2. They're still talking about, El Duque here. Do you leave him in? Do you take him out? They leave him in. He strikes out Jason Varitek. But kind of the theme right there that you kind of see throughout this game is they talk about Yankees have no left-handed reliever they can really trust. Against Varitek there in that spot, El Duque had some success against Varitek, so maybe that's why they left him in. But it was crazy to me that with this payroll and this lineup and this entire roster they had, they didn't have a dependable lefty reliever on this team.
Yeah, you bring up a great point because I have in my notes here, what's the point of getting Felix Heredia up to warm up? He was warming up that whole inning.
Right.
If you're not going to bring him in to face Ortiz or Varitek and you don't trust him, what is he doing up at that point? And that was the only knock on Joe Torre when he was manager. You know how you get the sports talk radio, disagreements with the manager every day?
Yeah.
Well, that's very prevalent up here. It's all they talk about all summer. Torre's handling of the bullpen was always an issue, that he never trusted a lot of guys, especially in spots like this in the postseason. I think you saw in this inning. And we have a situation now where the Red Sox are presented an opportunity when Damon beats that double play out, and they actually cash it in and take the lead.
Yeah.
I think that was a big moment.
So Mike and the Mad Dog were talking all about Joe Torre, huh?
No, I'm telling you, it was a thing. That you could go back and look.
No, I believe it.
Big games, he only trusted certain pitchers, and he would trust random pitchers. You know what I mean? That maybe weren't deserving. Like in this game, Tanyan Sturts. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like he pitched decently, but that was like one of the random guys that Torre liked.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Mike and the Mad Dog would talk about it incessantly.
So we're through 5. It's 3-2 Red Sox. A little bit of life in this series, as they point out. They led like 6 minutes coming into this game in the entire series, and here they do. They lead again. So a little bit of hope, a little bit of spark there for the Red Sox and all of Boston. But we go to the 6th. Matsui leads off with a triple. Lowe leaves the game there with the lead, 5 1/3. Overall, pretty good outing, I think. Not bad. Did his job. Had the lead when he left. Then he had Bernie. A chopper scores Matsui. But then Bernie thrown out at third later in this inning on a pass ball. Another big play there by Varitek. And what should have been, Bernie, to not be able to get there was kind of surprising. But gunned out, again, turns out to be a pretty big play.
Yeah, great play by Miller on that steal of third base, blocking the base, because it looked like Bernie was safe at first glance. The next play would have scored Bernie, actually. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's a big part of this as well. And look, you have Lowe, like you said, Lowe exiting the game at this point. He's responsible for that third run when Matsui scored.
Right.
And he's a guy whose lore kind of gets enhanced when, he let up 3 runs in 5 1/3 innings. You know what I mean? His role in this game, I think he's one of those guys where too much is made of his role. Now, he would go on to pitch game 7.
Yeah.
In a game where the offense largely led the charge, but Lowe with an average outing.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. So the Yankees, again, get the out at third. So you still have a couple more batters here, get through the lineup. You got another single. Posada comes in to score. Sierra gets the second. Ended up, though, after a couple more batters, eventually the Yankees take the lead. So what had happened is, you have a 3-2 lead, the Red Sox, and all of a sudden, the next half inning, you're down again 4-3. I just, everything points to the Red Sox just giving up and quitting here. And how could you not? But again, continue to fight, and the fans, as we talked about, stay in this ball game. So it's 4-3 after 6. And the big thing there was they were able to get out of that inning with the bases loaded and Jeter up. So they did survive, and maybe there is a little bit of we gave up the lead, but it could have been a lot worse. We still got a chance here.
Yeah, and you mentioned, you played baseball, I played baseball. The most deflating thing is when you work hard to take a lead, and then the next half inning, you just give it right back.
Yep.
Never mind if you had 8 decades of falling short like the Red Sox do, but give these players credit. They were able to put that out of their mind and get out of this inning. They show a sign in the stands in this inning that says, "I can't believe we fell for it again," with a Red Sox fan holding it. Like, the Red Sox fans now are already reverting back to that. I mean, we're only in the 6th inning here. This is the first time we see McCarver, or the second time actually, we see McCarver during the game defending Francona's decision to bring in Mike Timlin. That was another thing that was very prevalent in Boston in the sports talk, was them criticizing Francona and in the papers for his use of the bullpen. And I think you see McCarver come to Francona's defense a little bit here for that.
Yeah, we hadn't really mentioned Francona much at all, but this is his first season for the Red Sox, too, as the manager. So, still some questions in the air. He hadn't been a manager in baseball in 4 years at this point. So, was there a little bit of question when he got hired, by the way, too? Like, is this really the direction they want to go? Or was it felt like it was a good hire?
I don't remember at the time what the sentiment from Red Sox fans were. But remember, we're coming off Grady Little the year before. Remember?
I don't remember him. Yeah, I mean, now I do, but yeah.
Well, it was the whole thing where he left Pedro in too long.
Right.
That whole thing. So, yeah, the jury was still out on Francona at this point. I mean, that sounds crazy to say when you think about the success he's had. Obviously the success he had with the Red Sox and then now with the Indians. But back then, the jury was still out on him as a manager for sure.
Okay. So we go through the 6th inning done. Tanyan Sturtz, as you mentioned, replaces El Duque. 7th inning, very quiet. Red Sox go in order again, and they start kind of setting up Rivera, right? Rivera's available for 2 innings in this game. He didn't pitch game 3. He's already got, in his career, 26 postseason saves of more than an inning since 1996, which is nuts, okay, by the way. And he comes into this. They're kind of setting the stage. Your back's against the wall. Rivera is here against you. So go to the 8th inning. Rivera comes on. Again, 4-3. He's got the lead. He's been really good, and he's facing the heart of the order too. So this is the inning. To anybody watching, this is the inning he's got to get through. 8th inning, this is where the save happens, essentially, is what you think. You got Manny, you got Ortiz, you got Veritek. Got to get through this inning. So leadoff hit to Manny, and you're like, okay, this is a little bit of a shaky start. But then he retires the next 3. And I think at this point, you're through the heart of the order. You're facing the very bottom in the 9th. Assuming you don't get any runs at all, you got a 1-run lead. You're feeling pretty darn good right now.
Oh, absolutely. And this Yankees, this 7th, 8th inning stretch here, you had Bernie with a sliding catch. You had Tanyan Sturtz catching guys looking, right, when he was in the game in the 7th. Everything going the Yankees' way. This was the time period where when Rivera started getting warmed up in like the 7th inning and stretching, the camera would show him. Yeah. They'd mention his stats in the playoffs, like you mentioned. There was a serious lore attached to Mariano Rivera and how great he was, and it was well-deserved. And he just impacted team strategies, especially when you knew in a game like this where he was available for 2 innings. And like you said, that 8th inning, he allows Ramirez to lead to reach base leading off, but then buzzes through the next 3 guys in the heart of the order, and we enter the 9th inning.
Yeah, Keith Foulke is on, by the way, for the Red Sox. He does a pretty good job, too. In the 9th, he's got to face the top of the order, walks Jeter, but then it gets pop out, a line out, and Sheffield did crush that line out, by the way, to left field. He smashed it, but it was right to Manny. He was not known for his defense, but thankfully he didn't have to move a whole lot in that spot.
One of the unsung heroes, though, Ben, in this game was Foulke.
Yeah.
I believe he was 2 2/3 scoreless. And remember, we're coming off a game where the Yankees scored 19 runs.
Yeah, 22
So you may
hits,
think, well, hey, all he did was keep the Yankees from extending their lead. But, hey, look, that's a big deal considering the team scored 19 runs the game before.
Yeah, and it kept them within 1 heading into the 9th. And really a 2-run lead, you probably feel pretty much helpless against Rivera at that point, right? I mean, 1 run, it just takes a break. As we saw, Rivera starts off with a walk to Millar, okay? He's facing 7, 8, and 9 in the lineup. Walks Kevin Millar. At that point, Francona brings in Dave Roberts, who I forgot he was still on this team too, now a successful manager, but he was a pinch runner, a lot of speed, obviously, did his job. He's still second, and then you had Bill Miller up. But he singles to center field, and just like that, Robert scores, and they drew it up perfectly. Small ball gets the job done. They get a run across. Inning's still going. Rivera's still batting those. 4-4. You got Johnny Damon reaching on an error, okay? You got Orlando Cabrera striking out, 2 outs. They walk Manny. So then you got David Ortiz up all of a sudden, and you're thinking, okay, there's runners on what? Their bases were loaded at this point, weren't they?
They were.
With Ortiz. And this is the guy already has a big hit in this game to score a run. He's one of the best hitters in baseball at this point. Rivera gets the job done, gets them to pop out. So Rivera now has gotten through the heart of that order twice, but gives up that one run, and it's 4-4 now. I mean, such an improbable inning, but as you see, like, it just took the perfect execution there to make it happen.
It did. And look, with Rivera, he stumbled so infrequently in the playoffs that you could remember the games where he didn't meet the mark, right?
Yeah.
The only two ones that came to mind before this were 97 against the Indians when he was still younger, and in 2001 against the Diamondbacks in that deciding game with the Diamondbacks. That was literally it. That was the list of his postseason failures. And that's made this all the more shocking what happened here. And that Dave Roberts pinch run, stolen base, that's the play that Red Sox fit, that lives in Red Sox lore forever.
Yeah.
To the point where the fact that if you ask 10 Red Sox fans who got the hit to put them ahead in this game, I bet you less than half would guess Bill Miller. But that hit is lost in time and lost in history a little bit, I think, as well. Because Miller, who they did a good job in the broadcast of highlighting, he had prior success against Rivera, shoots one right back up the middle. And something that will never be talked about because of how this game ended is how Rivera did a good job getting out of the inning, how you just highlighted that.
Yeah, he did. So he gets into the extra innings, 4-4. At this point, they bring in Pokey Reese to replace Bellhorn at second. Now, a quick question for you. What's all the love with Pokey Reese? I mean, they mentioned it during the game. Bellhorn made a couple, sort of blunders, but not, tough plays that he didn't make. And the fans kind of started to boom a little bit, wanting Pokey in there. What was the attraction of Pokey? Just because he was a good prospect? I
never remember. I believe they traded for Pokey Reese. I think back then Pokey Reese was on the Reds, maybe.
See, I thought he was
traded
after
for.
that point,
I think he was a midseason trade, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, those plays Bellhorn made to keep the balls in the infield, those were tough plays. Those weren't routine plays. They literally started chanting Pokey Reese's name earlier in the game. I never remember that being a thing, but Red Sox fans get their wish, and Pokey Reese enters in extra innings.
Pokey's 1 year in Boston, by the way, and I forgot his timeline, but yeah, he came over from Pittsburgh. He was at Pittsburgh for a couple of years after Cincinnati. So, that was the deal there as well. So Pokey comes in. 10th inning goes by, pretty much uneventful. Again, we're getting to around midnight at this point. They show the clock actually tick over to midnight. The 11th, you got a little bit more action. The Yankees have a pretty good chance here. They get a single to lead off the inning, but really a big catch by Cabrera on A-Rod line drive that looked like he was going to get through, because Cairo is at second at this point. It looked like he was going to get through. Anything there kind of sets up the Yankees probably to have a nice little inning, but he makes a big diving catch, makes it 2 outs, and then they were able to get out of that inning there. That was a big play by Cabrera.
Huge, because the Yankees would get the bases loaded, and Leskanic got out of that jam there at the end of the inning. Another guy, Curtis Leskanic, who goes largely forgotten. Then you have Leskanic, now we're talking about, Keith Folk, and Bill Miller. Yeah. 3 unsung heroes. Leskanic got out of 2 jams in the 11th and the 12th inning.
Yeah, good point. Very good point. Bottom of the 11th, Red Sox have an opportunity. They got a runner to second base, but he gets stranded by Tom Gordon. Flash Gordon makes his appearance for the Yankees. 12th inning again. Nothing much happens at the top half. The Yankees aren't able to do a whole lot after a leadoff single by Jorge Posada. Leskanic gets through that inning as well. Then we get to the bottom of the 12th. It's Paul Quantrill. He comes in. Again, heart of the order. Ramirez leads off with the single. And then boom, very next pitch or very next bat, David Ortiz, home run to right field to walk it off. 6-4 win. Yankees lose the opportunity for the sweep. Red Sox extend the series and close out the game. But Ortiz, I think he's the one that's remembered. He had a couple of big hits in this game to score runs, give them the lead, including the walk-off. But again, I think, as you pointed out, it's some of the more unknown guys, the guys that don't get talked about as much, that play a big role here.
Yeah, I mentioned the 3 that I mentioned before. You had like Doug Mankiewicz with a key bunt at one point, you know what I mean, to help them out. Like, you just had all these guys, the guys I sort of knocked at the beginning for just being role guys when Ortiz and Ramirez sort of carried the whole team. Well, the rest of the team got Ramirez and Ortiz to the point in the 12th inning where they could kind of do their thing and win the game. And those guys can't go without being noticed, like we said. And again, Leskanic, Miller, and Folk most notably. And this is not the start of the legend of David Ortiz, but a very big part of it. You had his hit in this game, his performance in Game 5, and Ortiz would begin, sort of an odyssey here of becoming one of the more popular Boston athletes of all time. And a big part of it started with his game-winning home run in Game 4.
That's a great point. This is only his second year in Boston, by the way. So it's been his first, 6 years in Minnesota. This is his second year in Boston, and really his first big year. I mean, he had 31 homers, 100 RBIs the year before. Good numbers, but this is really when, as you point out, his legend really starts to begin, and he becomes the face, really, of the Red Sox before
I think
his career
Ortiz
ends.
got signed for a $1 million contract when he came over from the Twins.
How crazy is that?
Wild.
His best year with the Twins was 20 home runs, 75 RBIs. I mean,
that was the stretch where the Twins were a good team.
Yeah, indeed. So the game ends. Before we talk about kind of how the series plays out, what was the feeling on Rivera, but also the Yankees after this game? Was it kind of like whatever, you lose one, it's still 3-1, we're going to close them out next time we come through here? I mean, what was the overall feel at this point?
At that moment, that was the exact feeling. Like, oh, all right, well, it's one game. There was a little concern because they had Pedro and Schilling to go in games 5 and 6. But there was no cause for serious concern at this point. But looking back on it, now you have the Red Sox with the confidence, like, man, we beat Rivera. We came back and won. And I think that we didn't really know in the moment how much that fueled the Red Sox to do what they did in the next 3 games.
Yeah, they really did. And you go to Game 5, Boston gets down again. Just a quick recap. They end up going 14 innings in Game 5 before Boston walks it off in the bottom of the 14th to win 5-4. And then at that point, I'm sure the momentum, you could feel it shifting there. Boston goes into New York, the bloody sock game in Game 6 to win 4-2.
And then the ketchup, you mean the food coloring game or the bloody sock game?
Yeah, I mean, hey, whatever you want to believe, Mike. Could you imagine if we had Twitter around then, what we would have been talking about at that point with social media and the bloody sock? But yeah, so that was Game 6 and Game 7. Boston just obliterates the Yankees in the Bronx 10-3 to complete this historic comeback. And I mean, you really can't stress how improbable the outcome was. I mean, you even remember there's a graphic in the 12th, which is a perfect time to throw it up there too, by the way. They came up, and I'm sure you probably saw this, but the only team that was down 0-3 in the postseason history in Major League Baseball to win Game 4 in extra innings, okay, which we were at that point, was the 1910 Cubs. 25 teams had been down 0-3 and gone to the extra innings in Game 4, and all 25 of those teams since the 1910 Cubs had lost. So, I mean, you really can't stress how ridiculous and crazy and historic this moment was.
You mentioned Mike and the Mad Dog before, okay? So Francesa is a huge Yankees fan. Mad Dog is not. He hates the Yankees, okay? He's a San Francisco Giants fan, all right? He said after Game 4, after they were on the air in Game 4, that he thought for the Red Sox curse to be, done with and to be eliminated, that something cataclysmic needed to happen in order for them to break through. And he actually, in this moment, he's had a lot of bad takes over the year, but that take was 100% right. They needed something to break this curse, something completely cataclysmic. That's the word he used. I'll never forget it. I could barely say it. And he was exactly right. I mean, it was unbelievable in the moment. And that Game 7 in Yankee Stadium, when the Red Sox, the Johnny Damon Grand Slam, which was the nail in the coffin, and the Yankee Stadium being empty and Red Sox fans cheering, was a surreal sports moment.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Can't imagine what that was like, being up there and around that up close. But on the other side of the playoffs, by the way, it was the NLCS, was Houston and the Cardinals. Cardinals had the best record in baseball that year, but this was most remembered, and it kind of gets overshadowed by this, but this was Beltran's breakout and his incredible postseason where it seemed like he homered in every single game, but it essentially locked up all kinds of money for him because of this run with the Astros this brief period of time.
Yep, the Mets would go on to pay him that offseason. Of course. He was actually pretty good with the Mets. He gets a bad rap, but
he probably wasn't worth the money he was paid, but he was still a solid player, of course. But he just had that one of the greatest postseason runs, and a couple of the updates during this game we got to see a little bit of that. But the Red Sox would go on and sweep the next series against the Cardinals, who again were a really good team, but at this point there was no stopping the Red Sox, and they'd win the 2004 World Series, the first one since 1918 when they'd beaten the Cubs. So historic. And then since that time, as you mentioned, Mike, when we started the show, you can kind of point to Game 4 as kind of the point where everything changed for the Red Sox and Yankees, because the Red Sox have since won in 07, 13, and 18, have 4 titles since 04. The Yankees, on the other hand, they've been in the mix, right? But they've only been back to one World Series, and that was in 2009 when they won. But it's hard to believe, and I don't think I realized it, but they've only been to one World Series since this series. That's crazy.
Especially, like you mentioned, for a team like the Yankees that's always in the mix.
I mean, they were in it 7 out of 9 years going into this game, and they've been back once in 16 years.
Yeah, I think even as just someone who watched a lot of Yankee baseball during this time period, you sort of took it for granted. You just thought, like, hey, as long as the Posada, Jeter, Bernie Williams, as long as that core was there, they were always just gonna, it was like their birthright to make the World Series, and it just didn't turn out that way. They end up rebooting kind of around CC Sabathia and A-Rod and Jeter in 2009 and winning another championship. But yeah, it reminds me a lot of the Patriots in that way,
Yeah, that's a good point.
Where it's just a prolonged dominance, but there were some stretches in there where the championships ran a little dry.
Yeah, so that's where we are with the Yankees. And I mean, honestly, if you're a millennial right now, or you're somebody that's in their 20s, I mean, you probably look at these two franchises completely different now than our perception of these two when this game happened.
Yeah, let's say you're 20 years old, right? And you're a Boston sports fan. In your lifetime, the Patriots have won 5 Super Bowls, right? Mm-hmm. The Red Sox have won 4 baseball titles. The Bruins have won a title. And the
Celtics have won.
And the Celtics have won a title.
Yeah. And meanwhile, in New York, the Yankees have won one. What have the Knicks done?
Oh, it's been the opposite for New York sports. I mean, it's been brutal, absolutely brutal. And literally, I'm telling you, like before Game 4, 2004, the exact opposite people thought.
Yeah, it's crazy, man, how much has swung since then. But that's how important this game was, and we try to decide, hey, which game do you want to go back to in this series, because this series was such a big deal. And I think you made the point that this Game 4 was kind of the one you really have to kind of point to because of the way it played out, of getting to Rivera, just staying alive and having that hope. For the rest of the series kind of is what did it. And that's where we were, man. It's been pretty crazy. I don't really know of many what-if scenarios from this. I mean, I think the biggest ones would be maybe what if Matsui doesn't get thrown out the plate early in this game. I mean, a big play that we didn't mention during the game, but early in this game, they brought the infield in, threw Matsui out the plate, saved a run early. Maybe that was the first or second inning, and then the throw out at third. But I don't really know, kind of where else maybe they could have changed. What other what-if scenarios you might have thought of?
The only other what-if is if that scorcher that A-Rod hit, that Cabrera caught late in the game there, that line drive, if that happens to get through. The only
other what-ifs are probably big picture stuff, like what if A-Rod signed with the Red Sox over the Yankees, or just what if the Yankees finish this series out? What does this do to the Red Sox,
Yeah, I more think of it in terms of A-Rod. That line drive gets through. The Yankees have a big inning there. A-Rod is the best player on a World Series champion. I think it gets the monkey off his back a little bit earlier. It would eventually get off his back, sort of, right, in 2009.
Yeah, when
he was the best player for the Yankees during that title run. But he dealt with a lot of grief from 2004 to 2009.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, definitely seen it from a distance, but I can't imagine what it was like in New York day in, day out for him. So pretty crazy. I mean, social media, if that would have been around at that point and it was on the verge of exploding and smartphones. I mean, I only saw one guy, and we got to transition to outdated too, but I only saw one guy with the cell phone during this entire game. He was talking on it. It was one of the flip phones, but technology still had not even come close to exploding where it was. So let's run into some outdateds, Mike. What did you pick up on during this game?
Sort of what you just mentioned. The biggest outdated thing to me was when you're watching the game, it was about the game. Right? There was a score bug there to let you know what the score was, what the count was, how many outs there were. But it was still, the broadcast of the game was still about the game. And when they tossed to Jeannie Zalasko, she was just giving you the score of the NLCS and tossing it right back. And I kind of miss those days, to be honest, because it seems like broadcasts these days are a lot of times are tailored towards people who are not fans, with all the bells and whistles that they have on the screens and stuff.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm always amazed by the fact that the green screens were around at this time. I just don't remember it being that early on in technology, but that they were around. I thought it was still pretty crazy because we had this big shift. I mean, I don't remember really when Google became the powerhouse that it was, but this is still the time when websites were promoting keywords as a way to find what you wanted to.
Oh yeah.
And nobody
WebMD.
WebMD too was on there, but nobody now talks about keywords. I mean, you just look up what you want to. You can find it however you want to. You used to log on to foxsports.com, go to that top right-hand corner of the search box and enter keyword whatever, and it would take you to wherever you want to go. They were still doing that. AOL was still around. I think we're both amazed by how long AOL was so prominent in the internet age, but it was still being promoted. Still spent a lot of money to be a part of this broadcast.
WebMD, man. How much did doctors rue the day when WebMD became a thing? Because number one, everyone used to go in there and say, I think I have A, B, C, and D because I read it on WebMD.
Right.
Or B, people just look it up on WebMD and just don't even go to the doctor because they think they can diagnose themselves.
WebMD,
man.
It's
just
funny.
at the start of a shift in the medical industry.
Yeah, this game was still in HD too, which is SD, which is why it's outdated as well. Maybe there was an HD broadcast somewhere, but what's online still is still SD. And I thought the other outdated. They mentioned the Game 5 starters for the NLCS. Did you pick up those?
No, who are they?
Brandon Backey versus Woody Williams in the NLCS Game 5.
Woody Williams, man, that guy. He was on the Cardinals, right? Red hair.
Yeah.
Red uniform, red hair. Let's go.
So that's outdated. Anything else, Mike? Takeaway or just anything else you want to add to this game before we close out this episode?
No, honestly, man, I think we covered everything. It's just when you go back and watch this game, you still sort of got caught up in the moment, and it just brought back a lot of good memories of when baseball. This is the last stretch where I can remember, baseball being the most important sport to me. And I wouldn't miss one of these games or one of these pitches for anything. I was plugged into, and it wasn't even my team's playing, and I was plugged into every pitch and every out.
This game is kind of the reason why, we love sports, right? Because anything can happen at any given time, right? I mean, sure, it's unlikely. Sure, the Red Sox were 150-1 to win the World Series before Game 4, according to message board. But just the fact that on any given night you can see something you've never seen, and especially true in baseball. That's what's so fascinating about baseball is there's something almost every night that you maybe have never seen before happen in the game, and this series kind of sums that up. And the Red Sox changed the course of history for their franchise, for the Yankees franchise, for baseball with this win in this game, but then in this series as well to come back from that deficit and beat the Yankees. I mean, it's as big as anything that's happened in the game. I mean, I don't think you can stress that enough. Just against your rival in this situation, in this game, being down and back to the wall so many times to get through all that stuff, cataclysmic, as you and Mad Dog said, it sums it up. That's what had to happen, and that's what happened in this series. So, a great game from October of 2004, Game 4 of the ALCS. Red Sox win it 6-4. So we'll close it out on that note. Remember, hit subscribe, please. Please hit subscribe. Leave us a review as well if you feel inclined to do so. You can find us online at distantreplaypodcast.com. I'm going to put the link there, so if you want to go back and watch this game, you'll have the link there. Just a warning, 3 hours, 58 minutes without commercials, okay? Just a warning. Both of us sat through all that. But you might want to fast forward a little bit, potentially. But it'll be on our website, distantreplaypodcast.com. Find us on Twitter as well, Distant Podcast. On Instagram now, Distant Replay Podcast. And then, of course, on YouTube. Subscribe there as well. A lot of people have been checking us out there. And if you have any recommendations for games, we did one last week from a recommendation. If you have one, shoot it to us. Leave us a message on any of those platforms, and we'll bring it here to the show. So, Mike, let's close it out on that note, man. Enjoyed it. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. You put it perfectly. This game changed the course of history, and that's a great way to end it.